Hello and welcome to Gardening with Calyx. I am Thelma, and since we are approaching the holiday season, I thought that I would showcase a plant that is nice and red in color, similar to most of our Christmas decorations. Meet the lovely Aurelia chartaceae. Now, if you have plants such as these, who need lights to brighten up that corner of the garden? So in today's video, I'm going to introduce you to this plant, tell you a bit about it, and show you how easy it is to propagate. So please keep watching. Thanks for staying. And here she is, Aurelia chartaceae. Now that's a botanical name, and as I mentioned earlier, most of you will be thinking of the very popular landscaping plant, also known as Aurelia. Take a look. There's very little similarity between these two, but they're very closely related. They are in the same genus, Aurelia. As botanists do their classification, there are lots of other features that they look at, for example, the leaf shape, but more on that at another time. As I promised in the introduction, I'm going to give you a little bit of description on the flowers, the leaves, and the growing requirements. And towards the end, I'm going to do a quick little demo of how to propagate Aurelia. So let's get going. And let's begin with the description. Aurelia is a medium-sized, very lanky shrub, as you can see here. It is a native to the tropical rainforest regions of South America. I placed it in this location under a trellis in order to mimic the conditions of a tropical rainforest. You can see that there are some upper story plants. We have the pusstail, and high above that we do have the alamanders. I've also placed it where there are other tropical plants at the lower story, and it really is loving it. It's loving the outdoors, the dappled light, and it does get the showers, so the humidity remains high most of the time. This is a really wonderful plant. It produces these spectacular flower spikes, which really consist of large, brilliant red bracts that surround the true flower, which is these yellow things you're seeing here. You can see it more clearly in the older bloom on the left. While the bracts will last for several weeks, the orange flowers are short-lived, but they bloom in succession. In this garden, they start blooming sometime around August and continue all the way through Christmas and into, say, February or March the following year. I find the plant very attractive, even when it's not blooming. Look at the deep green contoured leaves that seem to sparkle when wet. They easily become the focal point wherever they are placed. Look at these that are allowed to intermingle with other plants in a hedge. They are pruned periodically, and therefore they don't get too tall or too lanky. Moving on to the growing requirements of Aurelia chartaceae, we've covered the most important aspect, is that it is a tropical plant. So it will prefer relatively warm conditions. We're looking at temperatures between 65 to 80 or 85 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're living in cooler climes, it definitely will not tolerate winter outdoors, so you place it indoors during the winter months. Although it does like dappled light, and we have excellent dappled light here, it can tolerate somewhat higher light conditions, but you have to make sure that you acclimatize it first, acclimate it first, before taking it out into brighter sunlight. We also mentioned that it does well if it is regularly pruned, and the time to prune would be after flowering, and in that case it will have a more bushy shape. Make sure that your Aurelia gets sufficient water, especially during the drier periods. It likes the moisture, it likes the humidity, but it also needs a free draining soil because honestly very few plants like to have their roots in soggy conditions. Slugs love this plant in my garden. Maybe you could say slugs like most plants, but That's the only issue we have. And of course, if you wish to treat your slugs, then you will have no problems with growing your Borrelia characteria. Borrelia propagates from stem cuttings as well as from seeds. Now, I haven't tried seeds as yet, and maybe it's something for me to look into, but I find it so easy to propagate from stems, and seeds usually take a much longer time. Now, 3 months ago, I came and I selected ideal cuttings from areas that I wanted to prune, and I left these two at the lower end just for demonstration. So these are the two cuttings, and I'm going to prepare them now by trimming off the extra leaves. And as usual, when you're handling any cutting tool and cutting into plant tissue, sterilize. We're looking for a cutting that has at least 2 nodes, because you're going to be placing the lower node into the potting media, the rooting media, and you're going to expect the shoots at the other node to start to grow. So based on the length of this cutting, I'm looking that I'm going to get 2 from it. So I'm not going to sacrifice and just do 2 and then have to throw away the others. So I'm going to make the top cut here, remove these leaves, and you see the condition of the leaves as I mentioned before. And the top 2 leaves, I'm just going to trim them to reduce the evapotranspiration during the rooting process. So we have a relatively longer cutting than I usually take. That's about a 10-inch cutting. And the piece, the upper section, I prefer to use the lower node here. It's getting a little hard. It's not exactly a softwood cutting at that point. And because, again, I'm just going to sacrifice the tip end, because I'm not using any misting facilities, I prefer not to use the very soft cuttings. All right, so 3 pretty decent cuttings. And the next step now is I'm going to be using rooting hormone to speed up things. And as usual, I always recommend you take a small portion out of the container. You don't want to contaminate the whole container. The rooting powder will stick better if you dampen. I'm using a very porous, sterile media to set the cuttings in. This is essentially a commercial mix of perlite, vermiculite, and a little coir dust. Yeah, I have dampened it already, so what I'm going to do is just carefully, notice I made a little depression, or I tried to, so that I don't rub off all of the rooting powder. This we will place in a cool area in the nursery. No need for any misting chamber. The leaves stay turgid throughout the entire period. And it takes between 6 to 8 weeks for sufficient roots to form. But let me show you, I had done, as I mentioned before, I've taken cuttings 3 months ago, and let me show you the results of that. Here is the first set of cuttings at the beginning of the rooting process. We kept it in the nursery for a little over 10 weeks. And at the end of that period, there's quite an extensive root system, not just roots, but the leaves also. Unfortunately, also there was some slug damage. The roots, it's not yet pot bound, and it's an excellent time now for us to put it in a bigger pot, the pot that we expect to keep it growing until maturity. The pot is already filled with equal parts of vermiculite, perlite, and compost. We bury it to the same level that it was in the smaller pot. I'm also adding some slow release fertilizer, and given the size of the pot, I'm using 2 tablespoons of the 14-14-14 NPK. This will give enough nutrients for 3 months. I'll be placing it in a location in the front garden that gets a bit more light than in the courtyard. Here, one of the easier plants to propagate. You have firm semi-hardwood cuttings, place in a sterile media, place it in an area that is protected from direct sunlight, one that has a lot of ventilation, and within very short order, in 2 to 3 months, you end up with a plant looking something like this, which is ready to be placed in the ideal location, or even for those of you who are following entrepreneurial pursuits, this is a perfect large plant for sale. Lovely. What do you know? We've come to the end of yet another Calyx video. We hope you found this content useful, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. And for those of you who have not subscribed as yet, please subscribe. We like to see our numbers climb, so therefore we are thanking all of those who have subscribed so far. Until the next video, which is next week, I am Thelma saying thanks for gardening with Calyx, and we will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.